Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're lifting off into something that feels a bit like science fiction, but it's getting very real, very fast. Electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft.
eVTOLs.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us as we try to unpack this really fascinating field.
Yeah, it's a topic with a lot of buzz, isn't it? Often gets lumped in with flying cars.
Exactly, that's what everyone thinks of.
But it's important to see eVTOLs as, well, something more focused, more near-term. It's really about shifting how we move within cities, maybe between regions, too.
Not quite the Jetsons yet, then.
Not quite everyone having their own personal flyer just yet, no. This is more about urban air mobility, really.
Okay, eVTOL. Let's just nail down the definition. What exactly are we talking about here?
Okay, so fundamentally, an eVTOL is an aircraft that's fully electric. And the key thing is it takes off and lands vertically.
Like a helicopter. Exactly, like a helicopter in that sense. But the big differences are the electric power aiming for quieter, more sustainable flights. And they're mostly designed for shorter trips. Passengers, maybe cargo. Think air taxis. That's the common term.
Right, air taxis. So that vertical lift feels familiar, but the tech is different.
Very different under the hood, yeah. A lot of eVTOLs use multiple smaller rotors, not like the big single rotor on a traditional helicopter.
And why do that?
Well, there are a couple of potential big advantages. One is safety through redundancy. If one motor or rotor has an issue, the others might be able to compensate. And the other big one is noise. Those multiple rotors often spin slower, which can make them significantly quieter.
Okay, quieter and potentially safer. That sounds like a winning combo. My curiosity is definitely taking off now.
Good one.
So what did our sources tell us? Where are we really with eVTOL development?
Well, diving into the materials, we've pulled out insights on, the key technologies driving them, the different kinds of aircraft designs companies are trying. Also, the infrastructure needed. Where do these things actually land and charge? Plus, obviously, safety, regulations, and then the bigger picture, the impact on society and the environment.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically to cut through the hype, synthesize all that, and give you, our listener, a really clear picture of where things stand now and, what the next few years might look like for eVTOLs.
Exactly. Separate signal from noise, so to speak.
Nice. So first big question, are these things actually flying properly yet, or is it still mostly just concepts and fancy animations?
It's definitely moved beyond just concepts. We're firmly in the development and testing phase. Lots of prototypes are being built. They're flying, doing test flights, gathering data.
Okay, so real aircraft exist.
Absolutely. But the big hurdle, the thing everyone's working towards, is commercial certification. That's the green light from regulators like the FAA here or EASA in Europe to actually carry paying passengers. And that's still mostly pending.
Right. Aviation regulation isn't something you rush. Makes sense. But are people talking timelines? I think I heard something ambitious, maybe connected to the Olympics.
Yeah, you probably heard about the Los Angeles Olympics in 2028. Adam Goldstein, he's the CEO of Archer Aviation, mentioned that as a potential time frame to see eVTOLs operating at scale there. It's ambitious, for sure.
Very ambitious.
But it shows the drive in the industry. Things are moving fast.
Okay, so commercial services like air taxis, that's still a little way off. Pending certification. What about just like personal use? Could I buy one sooner?
That's a really good distinction to make. The rules for flying your own aircraft for personal, non-commercial use that's often under different regulations, like Part 91 in the U.S. might be, let's say, less rigorous initially than for commercial air taxi services.
Easier to get approved?
Potentially, yes. So we could see personal eVTOLs adopted a bit earlier. There's a company called Air with their Air 1 model, and they're specifically targeting that Part 91 certification for personal use.
Interesting. So maybe rich enthusiasts get them first.
That's often how new transport tech starts, isn't it? But yeah, well, companies like Joby Aviation are aiming to launch commercial services maybe as early as 2025.
That soon? Wow.
Yeah, if they get that FAA certification for carrying passengers, that remains the critical step for the air taxi vision.
Got it. Okay, let's dive into the tech itself. What makes these things tick? Electric propulsion, obviously.
Right, that's the defining feature. And mostly, that means batteries. Lithium-ion batteries, pretty much like in electric cars, are the main power source right now.
But are they good enough? I hear batteries are still a limitation for EVs sometimes.
That's the core challenge, really. Current lithium-ion energy density, how much power you can store per kilogram, is around, say, 60 to 80 watt-hours per kilogram. That directly limits the range and how much payload these eVTOLs can carry.
So shorter hops for now?
Generally, yes. But, and this is important, there's a huge amount of research going into improving batteries. Better energy density is a major goal.
Are there other power sources being looked at beyond lithium-ion?
Definitely. Hydrogen fuel cells are another big contender. They offer potentially much higher energy density, maybe 500, 600 watt-hours per kilogram.
That's a massive jump.
It is. It could mean much longer ranges.
Yeah.
But hydrogen tech for aircraft is still at an earlier stage. More engineering hurdles,
Yeah.
infrastructure needs. It's not quite plug and play yet.
Okay.
And some are even exploring hybrid systems, maybe batteries for the high power needed for takeoff and landing, and then fuel cells for efficient cruising flight.
Best of both worlds, potentially.
That's the idea.
Okay. Fascinating power options. Now, the actual aircraft, they don't all look the same, do they? I've seen different designs.
Not at all. There's a real variety of designs out there. One common type is the multi-rotor. Think like a big drone, basically. Multiple rotors pointing down provide all the lift and control.
Like the lift aircraft Hexa or that SkyDrive one.
Exactly. Those are good examples. They're great for, precise movements, shorter hops.
Makes sense. What else?
Then you have tilt systems. These try to combine vertical takeoff with more efficient, airplane-like forward flight. So they might tilt the rotors themselves forward after takeoff, that's tilt rotor. Or sometimes they tilt the whole wing with the rotors attached tilt wing.
Ah, so they transition, like the Dufour Aero 3 or the Lilium jet.
Precisely. Those designs often aim for higher speeds and longer ranges than the pure multi-rotors.
Okay, rotors up, then rotors forward. Got it. Any other main types?
The third main category is often called conventional or lift and cruise. These basically have separate systems for vertical flight and forward flight. So maybe dedicated vertical lift rotors that switch off, and then propellers or jets on wings for cruising.
Like Vertical Aerospace's VX4 or Beta's ALIA, they seem to have that kind of setup.
Exactly. That's seen as maybe simpler in some ways, separating the flight phases. So yeah, lots of different approaches being tested.
It's amazing innovation. And I guess managing all those rotors or tilting parts needs some serious computing power.
Oh, absolutely. Sophisticated flight control computers are essential. They're constantly making micro-adjustments. And this reliance on digital control is also what paves the way for potential autonomous flight down the road.
Right, the self-flying taxi dream.
Companies like Invention are already building autopilots specifically designed to be certified for eVTOLs with different levels of automation.
Okay, so we know roughly how they fly. Let's talk safety. That's got to be absolutely number one for anything that flies, right?
Paramount.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable. Aviation already has incredibly high safety standards, and eVTOLs have to meet or exceed those. Public trust depends entirely on it.
So what are the biggest safety worries or areas of focus?
Well, several key things. The powertrain is huge, making sure the batteries are safe, reliable, preventing failures like thermal runaway, which is basically a battery fire. That's critical.
Yeah, you don't want that midair.
Definitely not. Then the flight control systems themselves, especially the software, and especially as autonomy increases. And how do batteries perform in extreme cold or heat? How do these aircraft handle strong winds, turbulence, icing?
And they'll be flying in cities mostly, right? That sounds tricky.
It adds another layer of complexity, absolutely. Flying in dense urban areas means needing really advanced systems for mapping paths, avoiding buildings, other aircraft, drones.
Obstacle avoidance.
Right. And even things like bird strikes become a bigger concern potentially because they'll be operating at lower altitudes more often than traditional airplanes.
Okay, lots to manage. Is the regulation keeping up with all this new tech? You mentioned certification is pending.
That's the classic challenge, isn't it? Technology often moves faster than regulation can be written, tested, and implemented. The FAA and EASA are working hard on it, developing guidelines for what they call advanced air mobility.
But it takes time.
It does. Partly because there isn't a long history of operating these kinds of aircraft in these kinds of environments, especially busy cities. So defining the operational rules, the safety cases, it's complex.
Is there international cooperation on this? So a plane certified in Europe can fly in the US, for example?
Yes, thankfully. There's a lot of collaboration between the FAA and EASA and other global bodies. They're trying to align their standards and certification processes as much as possible, which is really important for a global industry.
Good. Okay, so let's say they get certified. They need places to land, right? Not just airports. You mentioned infrastructure.
Right. The key concept here is the vertiport. Think of it as a specialized airport designed specifically for eVTOLs.
Different from a helipad?
Similar idea, but designed for potentially much higher traffic volumes. And crucially, they'll need the infrastructure for charging. Lots of electric power, fast chargers, maybe even battery swapping systems.
Ah, the charging piece, like EV charging stations, but for aircraft.
Exactly. Fast charging will be key to make the economics work, allowing quick turnarounds between flights. Managing the batteries charging, cooling, health monitoring, maybe swapping them out, that's a whole operational challenge in itself.
Are there standards being developed for what a vertiport should look like? Safety features, charging specs?
Yes, organizations like EASA, ASTM International, the FAA, they're all working on developing detailed design standards for vertiports, covering things like layout, safety zones, fire suppression, and yes, specifications for charging equipment.
And where will these go? Finding space in cities seems tough.
That's a major hurdle. Ideally, you want them located where people actually want to go, deep within urban areas. But finding the land, dealing with zoning, airspace conflicts, community acceptance, it's complicated.
So what's the plan B? Or plan A, maybe?
Well, for the very first routes, we'll likely see companies using existing infrastructure where possible. Maybe underutilized heliports, or even adapting parts of small airports.
Makes sense to start there.
Yeah, like Archer Aviation's plan with United Airlines in New York. They're looking at using an existing heliport in Manhattan initially. It helps get things started faster.
Okay, practical steps. Now, another big issue I always hear about, noise. If these are flying over cities, they can't be too loud, surely.
You've hit on probably one of the biggest potential roadblocks to public acceptance and scaling up. Noise is absolutely critical. If these are seen as just another source of urban noise pollution, it's going to be a huge problem.
But aren't they supposed to be quieter than helicopters? That's the promise, right?
Yeah, is definitely the intention, yes. And the designs generally support that. As we said, the multiple, slower spinning rotors help. Also, many designs have wings.
Ah, for forward flight.
Exactly. Once they transition to forward flight and the wings provide lift, like an airplane, they can reduce the power to the rotors, which significantly cuts down the noise compared to a helicopter that relies purely on its main rotor for lift all the time.
So the companies are actively designing for quietness.
Oh, absolutely. Companies like Archer and Joby emphasize this heavily. They talk about their aircraft noise blending into the background soundscape of a city, rather than being this intrusive new noise. Minimizing the acoustic footprint is a core design goal for them.
Is anyone, scientifically measuring this? Comparing them?
Yes, NASA is doing significant research here. Their RVLT project, Revolutionary Vertical Lift Technology, is specifically looking at eVTOL acoustics. They're developing tools to predict noise levels during design.
Okay.
And they're doing actual flight tests, measuring the noise signatures of prototypes like Joby's aircraft during different flight phases, takeoff, hover, cruise, landing.
So real data to back up the claims.
That's the goal. And it's interesting, some are saying we need to think beyond just simple decibel levels.
How so?
Well, a company called Whisper Aero, for example, talks about time-varying loudness, basically how the noise changes over time and how it compares to the existing background noise. A sudden sharp noise might be more annoying than a steady lower hum, even if the peak decibel level is similar.
Ah, the quality of the sound, not just the volume.
Exactly. And context matters. A noise that might seem loud in a quiet suburb could be barely noticeable downtown. There are also operational things, like the Helicopter Association's Fly Neighborly program, which guides pilots on routes and altitudes to minimize community noise impact. Similar ideas will surely apply to eVTOLers.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just how loud it is, but how loud it feels.
Precisely. Perception is key for community acceptance.
Okay, we've covered the tech, the safety, the infrastructure, the noise.
Yeah.
Let's zoom out. What are the bigger potential impacts if eVTOLs really take off? Pardon the pun.
Yeah. Well, the biggest promise, the one everyone talks about, is easing traffic congestion in big cities.
The dream of flying over the gridlock.
Exactly. Offering a faster, more direct A to B route, especially for trips where ground transport gets really bogged down. It's a huge potential societal benefit.
I can see the appeal. What about making travel more accessible or affordable?
Long-term, potentially yes. If the technology matures, if operations scale up, if costs come down, then maybe. But initially, it's expensive. Developing the aircraft, building vertiports, getting certified, these are huge upfront investments.
So probably not cheaper than a bus ticket anytime soon.
Unlikely, no.
Yeah.
Similar to how EVs started out more expensive, economies of scale will be needed to bring prices down eventually.
Could they replace helicopters for things like medical transport or police work?
It's possible in some cases, especially in urban settings where the noise and emissions benefits are significant. But again, current eVTOLs generally have limitations on range and payload compared to many specialized helicopters. So Maybe not a full replacement across the board, at least not with current tech. More likely to complement them or take over specific urban missions first.
Makes sense. And the environmental angle. Electric power sounds clean.
That's another major selling point. Compared to combustion engine cars or helicopters, eVTOLs offer the potential for significantly reduced air pollution at the point of use and lower greenhouse gas emissions overall.
Especially if the electricity comes from renewable sources, right?
Absolutely critical point. The source of the electricity matters hugely for the true environmental benefit. But studies do suggest that even with current grids, eVTOLs could offer lower emissions per passenger kilometer than cars in many scenarios.
That's encouraging. Any downsides? More stuff flying around in city skies sounds busy.
Yeah, that's a definite challenge. A big increase in low-altitude air traffic, especially if we get autonomous cargo drones mixing with air taxis. That requires a whole new approach to air traffic management.
Something beyond traditional air traffic control.
Exactly. We're talking about UTM uncrewed traffic management systems, sophisticated digital systems to coordinate all that low-level traffic safely and efficiently. That needs to be developed and deployed alongside the aircraft themselves.
Right, another piece of the puzzle. We keep coming back to batteries, too. Can we just dig into that connection a bit more? How crucial is battery tech progress for eVTOLs?
It's absolutely fundamental. We touched on energy density affecting range and payload. But it's also about power delivery, needing huge bursts of power for takeoff, then different levels for cruise. It's about battery weight, safety, lifespan, and of course cost. Pretty much every key performance metric for an eVTOL is tightly linked to the battery.
And safety is paramount, as you said. Battery fires are a big concern.
Huge concern. So robust battery management systems, or BMS, are critical. They monitor temperature, voltage, current in every cell, protecting against overcharging, overheating, ensuring overall battery health and safety.
And cost. Like EVs, batteries are a big part of the price tag.
A very significant part, yes.
Yeah.
Just like with electric cars, bringing down battery costs through technological improvements and mass production is key to making eVTOLs more economically viable.
So better, cheaper, safer batteries are basically the gateway.
In many ways, yes. Higher energy density means more range, more payload, more useful missions. And interestingly, research from places like Oak Ridge National Laboratory, or RNL, highlights that eVTOL battery demands are quite unique.
How so? Different from a car battery.
Yeah, think about it. A car needs steady power mostly, maybe bursts for acceleration. An eVTOL needs massive power for vertical takeoff and landing, then maybe lower steady power for cruise, then maybe hovering. It's a very different demanding cycle.
So you can't just stick a Tesla battery in an eVTOL and expect it to work perfectly.
Maybe not optimally, no. The way the battery degrades, its lifespan, how it handles those power peaks. It might need different chemistry, different internal structures, or different management strategies. RNL is actually working on things like new electrolytes, specifically designed to perform better under those demanding eVTOL conditions.
Fascinating. So battery R&D is really specific to this application, too.
It has to be to really unlock the potential.
Okay, before we wrap up, could you maybe just list a few of the key companies driving this? Who are the big names we should watch?
Sure. It's a mix, really. You've got established players dipping their toes in, like General Motors, showing off a Cadillac eVTOL concept.
Wow, gee.
Yeah. Then you have dedicated eVTOL companies that are further along, like Joby Aviation, who are really focused on that aerial ride-sharing service. Beta Technologies is interesting because they're doing both the aircraft and the charging infrastructure.
Smart.
Archer Aviation, as we mentioned, aiming for ride-sharing, but also aircraft sales. Vertical Aerospace over in the UK, pushing for global certification. And Eve Air Mobility, which spun out of Embraer, the established Brazilian aircraft maker.
So a real mix of startups and aerospace giants.
Exactly. And they all have slightly different aircraft designs, different target markets, different timelines. It's a very dynamic space right now.
No kidding. It really feels like we're watching a new industry being born.
It does. And that brings us back to the big picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As this tech matures, as these aircraft start flying, it really makes you wonder, how is this actually going to change things? How might widespread air taxis or even cargo drones reshape our cities, reshape our daily routines? What are the knock-on effects, the opportunities, the challenges we haven't even thought of yet?
That is definitely something to chew on. A profound thought to end on.
It's the big unknown, isn't it?
It really is. This has been absolutely fascinating, a really insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing all that expertise today.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk about the future of flight.
And thank you, our listener, for joining us on this exploration. We hope you found it as interesting as we did. If you did find it informative, maybe learn something new, please do consider hitting that like button or sharing this deep dive with someone else you think might be curious.
Yeah, it really helps the channel reach more people.
It absolutely does. So, until our next deep dive, thanks again for listening.
Thanks, everyone.